Good afternoon, America. You know what time it is right here on KAZ Radio, Cleveland's online inspiration station. One of my favorite shows, What's Going On, with Sir John and Lady D. And today, they got a special guest, none other than Khalid A. Samad. How are you guys doing today?
Fair to Midland.
I knew he was going to say it.
Goes with that fair to Midland stuff.
Can't you just be great?
You know?
Fair to Midland.
Awesome.
Fair to Midland.
You know, John is fair to Midland. One day that's going to change. I hope you'll rise above the fair to Midland.
You know what?
Above the middle.
John just likes the sound of saying
Is
fair.
that what it is?
No,
I think it just sounds good. It's easy for him to remember.
no, fair to Midland. When I may go to the next level, it'll be great. Until then. Well, we have a wonderful guest today. We have with us today Khalid Abdul Samad. And we welcome you. Because I think you got a lot to tell us.
It's an opportunity for me to sit with some people who I've heard about for several months over, different venues. And we definitely need to have our own media. We need to have our own radio. We need to get our word out from our perspective and our vantage point. And Fair to Midland is something I've heard from in my hood all my life. So, see on the same team.
Right. Well, thank you.
I had 13 uncles.
Okay.
All right, so the family's kind of big, and these family gatherings in different neighborhoods, different places and spaces. Fair to Midland was a universal greeting,
Yeah.
Well, now that we're going to talk about the fair to Midland, exactly, just break it down. What is the definition when they say fair to Midland? Because, your elders back in the day, that's what they would say. They would sit on the porch. Oh, Sam, how you doing? Oh, fair to Midland. You, Mabel? Me too. So what is it?
I just took it to mean that everything's cool, collective, and calm. No drama, and we want to keep it that way.
Exactly. Pretty much. And it's a very old saying too, but it's pretty much what it is. That's what it's summed up right
From
there.
The South, mostly.
From the South, okay, that's what it is.
And I got it from my grandmother and my mother, who used to say it all the time.
Well, I mean, if you listen to the word, if you listen to the words, fair,
right?
Okay, fair to the middle.
To the middle.
Okay, fair to the middle. So I mean, it means you're not doing bad, and you ain't doing great. You're fair, to the middle.
I'm content.
There you go. I can work with that.
I'm content.
Well, listen here. I wanted to have you on because I know everyone here in Cleveland know and have seen you around town. You get around, you're everywhere. But tell us exactly, give us a little history of your background.
Okay.
And how did you get involved into where you are today?
Well, as I said earlier, I had 13 uncles. And my grandmother owned a business. My grandmother, my grandfather on my father's side, they came up from Nashville, Tennessee, Pulaski, which was the birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. And they thought about entrepreneurship as being something that was necessary. So she owned a beauty parlor, and my aunts were beauticians as well. And during that time when I grew up, the beauty parlors and barbershops were the hub of politics and socializing and things of that nature. And actually, it was almost like rites of passage to go into the barbers and barbershops and things of that nature. And during that time also, it was the 60s, and she had a magazine component where people could buy the newspapers from different cities, the black-owned newspapers. So I'd read the Chicago Defender and the Baltimore Sun, the Pittsburgh Courier at a young age. And I had to be down at the shop at 6 in the morning in order to put the plain dealer together for Sunday papers to give it out. So I was around a lot of influential people that would come into a little space on Central, and they were very non-traditional leaders. Some were elected officials and council people, but then some of them were numbers people that were very wealthy and influential, and they had a certain kind of swag about them, so to speak. So And I also liked athletics. I love basketball when I was coming up, and to me, the most competitive basketball players were right in that vicinity of Central.
Okay.
We started on 33rd, and coming up, we moved out of the neighborhood, but still, it was the Bathhouse Central Rec. Was then called, it's not now. It's called Lonnie Burton, but then it had another name. I said POC.
Right, I remember POC.
And there was Fairfax. So I got kind of thrusted into that life. My uncle played basketball, and so I wanted to be like him and to stay out of trouble. But I was always around people who were in that life, so to speak. And I respected that. I saw they had a lot of influence and a lot of networking going on amongst themselves, and they were kind of autonomous. So that's kind of where I came up in there, and then I experienced, the 60s, watching the civil rights thing unfold in the South and being involved in the streets as a young man and going around. I met a lot of ball players from different neighborhoods. Everybody seemed to be talking about the same things.
Okay.
Black power, black empowerment, civil rights, and what do we need to be doing as young people coming up. I ended up going to JFK High School, and it was a good experience for me because a lot of my teachers were black.
Okay.
And Judge Una Keenan, now Judge, was my English scholar, English, teacher. My history teacher was black. My mathematics teacher was black. So I really didn't have an inferiority thing about, black, excellence, so to speak. And
Okay.
our principal then was a man named George Mills. He demanded excellence. And so we kind of, we did our thing, but we kept it in the parameters, that they gave us to a large degree. So that's kind of how I got involved in, wanted to be involved in the community. We worked on Carl Stokes' campaign as a teenager. Lou Stokes, Arnold Pinckney and them would come into our school and mobilize us to be involved in student affairs. And then, I was playing ball, so that opportunity allowed me to travel. I went to college on a basketball scholarship and was able to kind of go to different cities. And then I got more interested in, seeing how we could deal with our situation as a community, even though, we were in different geographical areas, because we have a lot of things in common with each other as African Americans, obvious.
Right.
And as I got older, before I left high school, I was asked to be involved with a program that was sponsored with the Urban League and Model Cities to help deal with some of the violence that was going on in Cleveland at the time, because it was after the shootout and the rebellion in Glenville and all this stuff. And we were like ambassadors with basketballs.
Okay.
We would go to the rec centers and play over here. It wasn't gang banging going on too much then. And there was a certain respect for athletes that everybody had to some degree, and all of us kind of knew each other. And so we ended up being heavily involved with Upward Bound at Case Western Reserve. And I was happy to be in that program, but I did experience, a life-threatening situation, is because July 23rd, 1968 is when the Glenville Rebellion took place, or uprising, and it was not too far from Case's campus. And we actually saw young men running across the grass with rifles and smoke coming out the barrels, and
Wow.
Everybody was like, hey, well, what's going on? We got to get out of here. The guy I rode over there with, he got in his car and left me and his partner, and we ended up trying to get away to get on a bus. I was going to go to my aunt's house on Wade Park, but look, the closer we got, the shots were louder. So we doubled back and went over to Ford and Euclid, where that little area is, and waited on the bus to come to 48. And he rolled right past us, and police officers rolled up in cars and pointed the guns at us.
Wow.
So we were like, man, we're in trouble. And I said, well, one thing I remembered going down by Delbert, there was always a lot of black females that were getting off work and people that worked in the Lakeside Hospital. I figured the bus was going to have to wait. So we took it down we ran straight to Delbert, made that left, and the line of women were there. And we got on our turn, we said, well, why'd you pass us up? He said, man, look at the back window. They were shot out.
Wow.
So that's kind of what got me even more involved and engaged in to find out, well, what's going on? What do I need to be doing? That was kind of, helped.
What got you started?
Yeah, that's what really took it to another level, when I saw and experienced that. With Cleveland, the Black Union, with Jim Brown, all those black athletes that were coming in. I was playing ball, and my uncle played for Southern University. He worked with Jim Brown's, Black Economic Union. And we met Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Ernie Green, all these, you know, these guys were like gods to us, you know, black professional athletes, and they were speaking their mind. You know, the Olympics were going on, you know, the Black Power sign was up there in the Olympics. So that was basically a lot of my influence, you know.
That is really awesome. You wanted to say something?
Oh, yes, I did. I was going to ask him. So now, with our community and things that are going around across the nation, relationships between police officers and the community. What are you doing? How are you involved in figuring that out?
Well, again, I was fortunate to get a job working in an area where there was really it was a groundbreaking initiative called the gang units. At the time, I was selling insurance for United Life, and working with a group called it was called the Denise McNair Center. It was headed by a man named Harley L. Jones, who was a black activist from Huff. He had been unjustly incarcerated on a homicide he didn't commit, and the judge reviewed a lot of stuff and let him out. He got a job with community reentry. He opened up the Denise McNair Center as a tribute to Denise McNair, who was one of the young ladies that was killed in the Birmingham church bombing. And many of us began to come through there and talk about what do we need to be doing across the street. King Kennedy was basically almost on fire with crack cocaine. Right. There were gangs from the Bloods to the Crips to the Jamaican posses and the little local homegrown groups, and they were all vying for making money because crack cocaine had become a major economic engine, you know, in our community for the negative side of what was going on. And as a result of, I got involved in that, and I said, well, wow, man, what's doing all that? What's driving this? And we had little gangs in Cleveland when we came up, but we got absorbed into the movement, so to speak. We had a little group out on Lee Road and out there in the village. We called it the Ponderosa. It wasn't, it was a bunch of us, and we banged, but we never pulled guns and weapons. We fight maybe a little bit and go on about our business, but there were little groups, but nothing like the Crips and the Bloods and all that. And I think a lot of that was attributed to the fact that the black leadership here was so strong, and there was always relationships between those in the faith-based community, the activists and all that, and they kind of kept that. I think like it didn't get out of hand like Chicago and LA.
Right. There was more, and also maybe kept us, like you mentioned, those people who came into your mother's shop.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
they had more control.
Oh, no doubt. And they was like gangsters. I mean, they were what you would call whatever they call themselves, hustlers.
Businessmen.
You wasn't gonna punk them out now, so
right.
You kind of stayed in your lane when it came to them. But they even were politically active to a lot. Right. They were telling us stuff, well, you want to do this, you do that, blah, blah, blah. So I said, well, what can I do? And I talked with some friends of mine, and the Cleveland schools and the city was having a lot of problems. And, I said, well, let me think about going into law enforcement, public safety, in a way that would be, an example for younger people who may, and there were black police officers that I admired, and I was friends with their children. One woman, Miss Jean Clayton, she was the first black woman police officer in Cleveland. Oh. And I grew up with her son and her family. We all kind of grew up in the Lee Harvard area.
Okay.
And there was another gentleman there who was the founder of the Black Shield along with her. So they were always encouraging, us to take the test, do this and do that. Now, before I left to go to college in Alabama, I was on basketball scholarship. I got recruited and almost joined the force then. It was like in the mid-'70s. But I had a basketball scholarship to Alabama, so I took that, and said, well, if I get a chance to come back, maybe I'll look at it again. And I did. And just so happened, Stanley Tolliver, the late Stanley Tolliver, Harrison Dillard, and some other leaders sat down with me and said, look, we're going to start our own gang unit, our own law enforcement component within the schools, in order to clamp down on this gang violence and do something different, and we'd like for you to be a part of that. A lot of our brothers unfortunately had felony convictions because of the nature of the criminalization of communities of color. Right. I didn't have one, so I took the little test, went through the training and all that, and we started the first school-based gang unit probably in the country. And then we partnered with CPD and the other, departments, and we were talking about community policing. Right. As opposed to just suppression and arrest and all that kind of stuff. And being that I had played ball and knew a lot of these guys from these different cities, I went and started reaching back to them through my political or religious involvement, social involvement, found out that many of them were doing similar things in a volunteer capacity as activists. You know, there were guys that I played ball with in Chicago when the gangsters were like very influential. Right. And then I got back in touch with some of those guys and found out that they were doing community activism in Chicago, helping to stop the violence. And those gangs in Chicago where, you know, there was they're on a whole nother game. That's a whole nother planet.
Very organized.
Very organized. Then the Cali boys, you know, were coming all the way here with crack.
Right.
And they were like there was a couple ball players that I remember were Crips and Bloods when I was playing ball. I had no idea what that was. I just knew that they seemed to be into something. Later on, I found out what it was. You know? So that's what.
So what fraternity is that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Man, if you don't know the handshake, you wasn't getting past the door. You know what I'm saying? If you had your hat turned the wrong way and your belt was not what consent you had, you'd have a problem, man. And I was like, wow, man, good thing we, you know, dodged the ball with that in Cleveland. But then it came.
Yes.
The crack brought everybody here. And Cleveland was a city where it was virgin territory because the drug dealers didn't have big, strong gangs with, man, look here. The GDs, one group, they had their own little Bible type thing. It's called a lit book. It had 100 pages in there. You had to have prayers. You had to know alphabet. You had to know handshake. You had to know how to do this. You had to know the history of the gang, when it started, who the enemies were, all of that.
Wow.
Then you had the Vice Lords. They had the same thing.
Yeah, I remember
Blackstone Range. They had the same thing. So they had their own funeral services. They actually would literally go into a funeral home and change the
whole
body, the outfit. If the mother and them didn't know, and their boy was a Blood, and they had put black on him, they would go in there and take the black off and the blue off and put the red on the individual. And the funeral home wasn't going to say nothing. And I understand that because they were violent. And so consequently, this is what got me more involved in trying to say, man, we better get in front of this. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. And we found out about it in a nick of time because basically by 92 in Cleveland, and a lot of adults didn't know this, the whole city had been balkanized. If you went on 105th down there by St. Clair and somewhere in those areas, that was called Vice Lord territory. And they had a name for it, the Promised Land. If you went on Huff, you was in the Promised Land too. Wow. If you went on 130th and Benham and all up in there, that was Blood territory, Vice Lord. If you went over on Griffin, 130th, Kinsman, all that was called the 6th Ward. That was all GD, Gangster Disciple. And them young people, they all knew, you know, to a degree what was going on when they saw each other.
Right.
And they wore colors and dress. Even if they wasn't in it, the kids started wearing the colors of the gangs because when they came home, they weren't in it, but they wanted to affiliate and they were down with it. So the whole neighborhood started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And homicide rates started jumping, the drive-bys and all this, the crack cocaine, and the inability of law enforcement to address it from a proactive perspective because they was busy just following up on shootings, drive-bys, dead people. All they were doing was coming after the fact. So our thing was we need to get in, get an intel, find out who's who, what's what, who's calling the shots, and find out if there's any sane people in these other cities that are trying to make a difference or do something different. We found out that it was. And that's what kind of took us, you know, to the next level with it in terms of diplomacy, finding ex-offenders who had been there and done that, knew the game, what it was about. We could bring them in from Chicago. We went up there and met with them, their gang units, and sat down with their leadership, especially like the civil rights guys and the black power advocates that were all working together because by that time, it was way out of control. So you got a man who now a lot of people don't maybe think about like they did 8 years ago at the Trinity Cathedral, you know, the minister there, you know, that Obama had to distance himself from.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, he was right in the middle of all of this.
My.
Minister Farrakhan, the guys from the Muslim community, Hebrews and all that, strong Christian leaders in Chicago that said, look, man, come on up here. You're going to be a part of this. We're going to take a proactive approach to this thing. It was like 90, 91 in there. And then we had an opportunity to go to L.A., and sit down with the leadership there, and they had similar, maybe not as deep rooted as Chicago, because the black church and the black movement seemed like it was a little deeper historically rooted in Chicago than L.A., but they had other stuff going on there in L.A., and we sat down with them, and then came back to have out a strategy, just God's blessing and mercy. I was coming home one day from work, and I saw a guy named Ben Chavis ride by, and I knew Ben Chavis from the movement. I said, where is he going? I didn't, maybe he's here for a program or something, right? Saw him again, and I told my friend O'Malley Bay, I said, man, I think I saw Ben Chavis a couple times here in Cleveland Heights, in the Shaker area, whatever. So I said, let me find out. I called a friend of mine. They said, yeah, he comes to Cleveland often. He has a house here because he was doing environmental racism for United Church of Christ, and their world headquarters was here.
Right.
So we got in touch with him, and he said, look, man, we're working on this violence thing. I got a guy named Carl Upchurch. We planning a big summit to try to bring the religious leaders to go together. I said, well, where's it going to be? He said, Chicago. So I said, well, who is it going to be with? At Trinity Cathedral. And he said, you're welcome to come up. And then the brothers from L.A. and sisters from L.A. came out, and they said, look, man, you got to come here because L.A. is blowing up. And we don't get on top of it. And what happened is, in my position as a professional with the gang unit, I reached out to the civil rights guys and the activists, Harlell and them. And they said, look, man, go get some young brothers and sisters. We'll go to CMHA. We'll try to get maybe some money to fly a few of them out to be a delegate to whatever's going to go out there. And we took a few of them out, about 2 or 3, and got out there, man, and saw what was going on. And it was like heartbreaking. We went to one school in one neighborhood. Everybody in there had on blue, just about. Going to the gym to meet with the Crips, and they had about 10 or 15 guys riding around in wheelchairs. We went to another side of town. It was a blood thing. Same thing.
It seems like you're very much was involved in pushing community policing. Now, way the violence is escalating. We were talking about before the show started, July 4th up there in Chicago, what happened. And we were talking how it's changed a little bit more. They're more predatory. And that kind of attitude seems like to be across the nation, or again, more prevalent across the nation. Do you think it is because our enforcement went for more than a community policing kind of attitude and more to a militarized attitude to help cement the gangs and all these, to feel like they're at war?
The gang said the same thing when we were talking. They said, oh, they doing flybys, we're going to do a drive-by.
Oh.
They saying either you're with us or against us. Those were they were hearing what Bush and them were saying, and they were saying the same thing. Even Clinton, unfortunately, when we did these summits, we sat down at the White House. The Congress, Lou Stokes, man, come on, he was in another realm. He put us on a Skype, and then we went to the U.S. Congress and testified, me and O'Malley Bay, about gang violence and this and all. He arranged all that stuff with Maxine Waters and Bobby Rush out of L.A., out of Chicago, and we put all this stuff together. And Clinton, the so-called centrist, instead of him embracing it, he invited Jesse to the White House, made these promises, and then, our thing was, you got to meet with the Attorney General, and we get ready to do 3 strikes you out and the minimum mandatory. And we was like, hey, hold on with that, man. We got a peace movement going on here that's working. By that time, it was like 93. We had a summit in Kansas City with all the leaders of the gangs, Mexican and Hispanic. Nobody had done that before. It was the first in the history of America. 1 month later, because of the black history, black leaders here, we went to Lou Stokes. Lou called in Mike White. They called in the judges, Judge Harris, the council people said, look, we got something going on here that may save our people in a way like never before. They allowed us and helped us to work to put together a organizing summit in Cleveland 1 month after we left Kansas City. Everybody came here. Mount Sinai Baptist Church, Reverend Matthews, all the ministers, the imams, the Nation Islam, all the groups brought their congregants in. The young people went down in the basement. We had them sign peace treaties. We didn't have a drive-by in Cleveland for almost 9 years. There was no more graffiti on the walls, on the churches and the buildings, everything. They stopped wearing the colors. Instead of them seeing that as a major development and funding and financing that, like Bosnia or Vietnam, wherever there's a war, when the war ends, everybody got guns. So you take the guns from the soldiers, give them some jobs, give them some skills, because they could always keep them guns and go do something. But in America, what they gave them was 3 strikes you out, minimum mandatory, crack versus cocaine, powder. And as we were doing this work, the crime rate was going down. The gang crime rate in Cleveland went down dramatically, but the incarceration rates were going up. Thanks to Clinton's, omnibus crime bill. So this is where we begin to see the cynicism, the politics, man.
Because he pretty much went that way because he was trying to save himself.
He
well,
cut
he
out
had to make a deal. He had to make a deal, and he chose to
he
make
made a deal with the devil.
He made a
Here
deal
come
with
the
it.
private prisons. Here come your relationship with the right wing of the Democratic Party.
Right.
Here comes all of these human tragedies that we're looking at, because now families are being dismembered, because now you got households that are headed up by women in a disproportionate number, like never before.
Are you a Section 8 believer or not?
Hey man, look here, brother. I know this much.
Sorry, my little.
No, you're on the money. That you don't send no. You can take.
Well, Larry's
what
on
they
the
say,
money.
you can take to somebody out the country, but you can't take the country out
That's
somebody.
Right.
You got to socialize people. You can't take people from the projects 2-3 generations down and just give them a house and say, okay, now
Exactly.
we got somewhere.
I
So
agree
all
with
of
that.
that was a result of what they were doing, and it could have been done. Lou Stokes sat with there and us and Attorney General of the United States, and we were in the room with the Vice President, and we said to him, look, man, we don't want no publicity. I know y'all don't want to be associated with black Muslims and people that wear funny colors and got funny names, because you want to be the right-wing centrist president. We knew that. Yeah, it said, look, y'all keep talking to who you want to, put them out front. Just give us the money, because it's about saving the lives. I mean, the media was going to cover it anyway, because anytime you brought all those gang leaders together talking about making peace, every news person in the world was there in Kansas City, and they definitely all came to Cleveland because we had support of the mayor and the Congress people and the black elected officials, the clergy, even the white police chief and them was like, hey, man, we're down with it.
Right.
Wow.
But was no peace dividend.
Right. So mainly, when they went to that way in our enforcement, that is what you think it's still.
That's why we're here today
Yeah,
talking
talking
about it
about
right
this.
now. That never would happen if they had given some substance of some resources to the efforts that we were talking about dealing with. Because, I mean, these guys, some of them were, very influential gang leaders. They weren't broke. They weren't going to take no jobs at no McDonald's.
Right.
And I'm not trying to trivialize it, but those kind of young men need to be trained in entrepreneurship. They got money sitting somewhere. I ain't trying to figure out where their money was, but they could have been involved in real estate.
Or something. They need to be
Yeah,
trained in
exactly.
entrepreneurship because obviously they have the intelligence.
There it is. And then we started
have the
talking about
intelligence to do
politics.
what they were doing.
What they were doing, I said, look, man, they came up with this thing about, hey, man, if you a member of a gang, you got to register to vote if you're 18. Now, that started sending some messages out.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, so you got these former gang members that are 18 and up. Not only should you register to vote, join the NAACP, join the ERB, join this, join that. And you have a certain flavor, you got a certain history, you got a certain experience that you bring to the table. Bring it, be a part of the solution. And we're talking like this because we just know that this was going to happen.
Right.
We had no idea that the betrayal would be that deep, man, when it comes to these kind of forces. But we
Political
started
forces.
looking at those who own the prison system.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, there is a prison system company on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yep.
And they're
Let me get this.
yeah, go ahead.
And you're right.
Right.
You're right.
They are, and they're still around today.
Yes,
you got, those that now are connected with the Justice Department now, and the Secretary of whatever it is, Sessions and all that kind of stuff.
Attorney General, yeah.
Attorney General's friends own prisons.
Yes.
His friends were involved with, stopping people to register to vote.
Yeah.
He himself might as well be a Klansman without the sheet. Now he got on suit. But now the language, man, is that they talking about, well, this is conservatism. My whole thing is Since when did a political determinant have anything to do with morals? If you're a racist, that's a moral question. That's not a political question. That means that you are immoral and ungodly. It should actually be characterized or labeled as satanic, because the first racist was Satan, and his racism was at all human beings. So how did that now become, well, you know, you can be a little bit racist and you're just conservative and you want to move slowly, and I'm like,
Right.
man, are you out of your mind?
But even if you are, you know, I think a lot of my personal opinion with a lot of conservatives who term themselves conservatives today, are to me racist. And bottom line is that you can be that, but you can also do what the Constitution says. And I think a lot of people, one of my favorite people in history is the guy who was the Supreme Court Justice.
Thurgood.
Not just Thurgood, but the guy who was head Chief Justice.
Oh, yeah.
He was, and people do not understand this, he was a Ku Klux Klan member, never stopped being one. And when he got a lot of flack about it from white conservatives or white racists, whatever, about against the Kansas Board of Education.
Oh, yeah, Brown versus Board of
Education, and then also breaking down a lot of the segregation laws. And he said one thing I thought it was so important. He said, "I have my views. I have the way I was brought up. But I am not just the Chief Justice of what, you know."
Oh, I
I
understand.
am the Chief Justice
Yeah.
of the United States, and that includes anyone who lives in the United
The
States.
history of the
And
world,
this
man,
document
it bears that out.
says-
Yeah. I mean,
Can't go on my personal view.
hey,
It's what this says.
the Quran says God created us in nations and tribes so that we know ourselves and one another. And the best of
Right.
us is he or she is most righteous. So he gives credence to the fact that there were nations that were created through tribes or ethnic groups and whatever. And my whole thing is, when it comes down to that whole thing about race, I always do this. I go talk to the kids and I pull out a piece of white paper. I say, y'all know anybody this color? Of course not. So really I know white people.
Right.
I mean, and very seldom you see people this dark. So
Right.
consequently, racial determination is not correct. It's more of an ethnic determination. We all one race, the human race.
Right.
Now, Europeans obviously have become a dominant ethnic group as a minority in the world today. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And they promote and practice nationalism, white nationalism. And they have done that for several centuries. However, there was a time when the whole world kept that in check, so to speak, and they didn't see themselves as being a dominant people when they had to go somewhere and try to put that down on some people, and then people say, hey, man, I hear what you're saying, but this is who we are. Right. Now, we can reach common ground, and we're going to have to go to war because I'm not going to be your servant. I'm not going to be, humiliated or feel insecure about myself, and then you're going to feel superior about yourself. We're not going to have that kind of relationship. But people don't know that history. And examples real quick. The Moors, which is really a word that means Muslims of dark hue, ruled Spain, Italy, and part of, for like 800 years.
Yeah, North
so
Africa.
why is it that history is not taught? How is it that nobody know about? Now we know about it. That when you
Spain
say
knows- Spanish
Spain
people
knows
know
about it,
Right.
you know what I mean? And
Italy knows about it.
Look at what that period of time did for Europe. They were really going backwards as a people.
Well, it brought them up.
They were not really hygienically together.
Right.
Many of Europeans could not read or write. You understand? They were caught up in all of this superstition about stuff. And what happened is when these black people came to Spain, they brought civilization. They bought ink pens. They bought pencils. They bought paper. They bought all kind of pharmaceutical things. They bought compasses. These people were talking about the world was still flat. And the brothers
Education.
from the Moors was, no, man, the world is round. Let me show y'all maps. That's how we trade. But y'all got all that going on? So what happened is that a lot of this misinformation that came up later was based upon them coming up with a political social construct to say, man, we're going to lose our power to the so-called people if we don't check these cats. that's coming in with all this civilization now. You know, they up in castles, sitting up somewhere with guards and all kind of, you know, the whole history.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, you have
so
the Middle
I'm
Ages
saying
and
that
stuff
to
like
say this. White America, European America, in America have not told the story. They made it seem like they've never had any relationship with dark-skinned people before they got over here and started slavery.
Well,
That's
they
a
did.
lie.
Well, they
of
did.
course they did.
And I think earlier settlers, and that's another thing, a lot of people don't understand, like early settlers were not just white people. And especially North America, well, across the board. But in North America, they knew that after the whole situation in Roanoke.
Yeah.
So, and they were not slaves, the first black people who came over
Exactly.
here. They were actually people paid to come over here with the English ships and things like that. On my father's side of the family, none of them were slaves. They came over as free, and also married
Right.
to a white person.
And it
so
came
that's
later.
something that white people don't understand.
Right. That's why they
you know?
instituted those laws to go across the board and take everybody's right,
But that-
especially
right.
yeah,
And
that's where it came in.
It came after we became a country.
And you know what's deep,
And
man?
then,
You saying this.
again, it's that compromise that was
That's
made.
it. That political thing for the economic gain and control people. On my mother's side and my father's side, my great grandmother was Cherokee. He ran away from a plantation, and he moved in and got in there. In the oral history of the family, it was all kind of black people all mixed in with it was black Cherokees and all that, and they lived autonomous. Then when
Andrew Jackson.
Trump's hero, Andrew Jackson came in with
He
the
wanted
Trail
the
of
land.
Tears, took the land, and he killed a lot of red and black people. That's why my family had to leave, because the birthplace of the Klan is where they lived, in Pulaski. And they had my great-great-uncle killed a couple of Klansmen because he was a blacksmith. And, you know, blacksmiths made money. And they came, tried to take his horses and all that kind of stuff in the name of the Klansmen, and they lost the gunfight. They had to get out of Dodge.
Right.
They ended up, some of them went to Nashville, and my grandmother and them came all the way up to Cleveland, you know, because you know how that is.
Right.
Back then, they had bounty hunters and all that kind of stuff going. But this, like you said, it's a history that they don't want to acknowledge
or
and,
teach.
Yeah, and that way, you know, all
that's
y'all
why-
were slaves.
right.
And black is synonymous with
No,
slavery.
and
No,
it's
number
not.
one, it's not an African word. Slave comes from the word Slav, and the Slavs that they were talking about were Europeans. There's no African word or Arabic word for slave. That's something they made up to justify slave trade and enslaving people who were free and not slaves. And so we're dealing with now you know, like you say, it's a rebirth
Well,
of this stuff.
it's a
you know?
rebirth of this stuff, and
Yeah.
it's both sides, you know. And I also think, you know, like on the continent of Africa, they have to take responsibility too, because they would put people in slavery. They sold them,
Yeah.
you know, they captured them. It was a business. Yeah, we
Let me ask you
understand.
this. Your family in Roanoke, were they Republicans?
What?
Your family in
No,
Roanoke?
well, my father's family started with, came over here. Alexander Breckenridge came over here, and his wife Letitia Breckenridge.
Okay.
Letitia was actually a great granddaughter of a Moor.
Okay, there you go.
From Scotland. He was part of the rebellion against,
Harper's Ferry.
well, no, the last Stuart.
Yeah.
So trying to retake the throne, wants to give it to William and Mary. And that's how they end up over
A
here.
lot of African Americans I met from that
Right,
region
yeah.
are Republican because
Well, they were Democrats. You got to remember that in the beginning.
What that happened is in the South, they were the Dixiecrats, and they were racist. They were the Klansmen on my mother's side. So a lot of them were. My mother's father was a staunch Republican, and on my father's side, when my uncle and them they got involved with the Moore Science Teach. All of them were Republicans, but they weren't racist then, and they were pushing entrepreneurship. Eisenhower and them, you know, those kind of Republicans weren't on that racist stuff. But then when that racist element became
the
prominent,
racists and the communists
they took
and all
over
that
the Republican Party.
Party.
And then
Goldwater,
that
Edge.
ended a lot of positive relationships between the free blacks who were never enslaved until
Right.
after all this crap came in, you know, with the Brown versus not Plessy versus Ferguson.
Segregation. and
Yeah,
things like that. That
you know,
started with
there's
Woodrow
see
Wilson.
Plessy versus Ferguson allowed for racists to be dominant in all of the country because they said black men have no rights that white men have to honor and respect. That didn't mean enslavement. They just said across the board.
Right.
So that undermined all the African Americans here in America. And what's deep about it, we found out in our research, and it's all in the history book, that the first head of state of a sovereign country to recognize the United States as a free country was Morocco.
Yeah. Morocco was the
The
first.
black man who reigned over Morocco was the first one
To recognize
yeah,
the
and
United States.
and part of his recognition was, hey, look, if I recognize y'all, you gotta let them Moors and them black people go. If they say they Moor, they say they free black people, you gotta let them go. Of course, they didn't honor the agreement, but the Moorish Friendship Treaty is still on the books.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So it's like, and all the Moors were not Muslim. A lot of them were Christian, a lot of them were Jews.
Right.
Because during what they call it, the Inquisition, man, they dogged everybody
But it was
out.
before that. You know,
Yeah.
that the Moors were a very. Actually, it was a democratic society.
Oh, yeah, it
almost.
was. It
Even
was.
though they had the emir was in control, he had a council, and that council came from across the board of people that they ruled. And that council actually had some weight and power to
Oh,
it.
it was separation of
because
powers.
He had to give credence to a lot of their suggestions. And you can see that in all across southern Spain, southern Italy, northern Africa. So that was Jews, that was Christians, and that's what made their state so strong and last so long because of the way they
That's
got
right.
along with
The
everybody.
whole history,
and
man, has
freedom
to
of
be
religion,
flipped.
so to speak.
We have
Now,
to deal
there
with
was
it.
a tax on that.
When our young
but,
people,
you know,
when our young people started joining these
Better
games
work.
in Chicago, the reason we found out later on the reason why they started these groups because the Irish, the Italians, and them already had those groups,
Right.
Okay.
So
and
to
they were
speak, the
used.
mob.
They used to attack the people that sometime were involved with these union debates, union skirmishes between the corporations and the Italian, Jewish, Irish unions. The blacks weren't in the unions. So they used the blacks sometimes as strike breakers, but them brothers didn't have jobs, so any little job they could get, they took it, and then they would sick the
20s
gang
and 30s.
members on the black men. Then that created friction between the blacks and the poor whites. So then the blacks started groups to kind of defend like anybody in common. You ain't let nobody just run in your neighborhood, tear you up and dog you out and all that, and you can't defend yourself.
Right.
So that's how the vice lords got started in Chicago.
That is how they
That's
did
how
get
they got.
started.
And I met these guys that was in their 40s and 50s and had been in the vice lords since the 50s, and they showed us pictures. Especially when the murder of our young brother down in Mississippi took place. When what was his name? The young boy that they Emmett Till, because his family was from Chicago, and they showed us pictures when all the vice lords and all these guys and TAMs came to that funeral and helped out, with the crowd control and all of that, and then they along with some other leaders. Sent messages.
It's their response to, of course,
exactly.
the Italian mob and the Irish mob, and the Jewish
like the
mob.
Daley family.
Yeah,
Daley, when we went to the Chicago
They
summit
control.
in Chicago, this is the at Trinity. Now he asked everybody to turn the cameras and the tape recorders off. Let's go in another room. This is the former mayor of Chicago. Okay, now, and he said this, Jeremiah Wright. Let me tell you something. Now, Jeremiah Wright was the man then in Chicago. He said, I want to tell you, without a doubt, I was a gang member. He said that the Irish mob recruited us and said, we got to stop gang banging each other and getting in trouble. And they're going to give you some jobs, and you're going to start registering people to vote. And this is what y'all going to do. And if we get any problem from y'all, we're going to come get your leaders. And Daley and his father and them was all involved with that. So to just go to show you, this is nothing new. This stuff about gangs or social
It's
groups
not
and all
nothing new.
that.
Everybody has gone
It's
through
something
it.
that's always
They go
happened
bond.
from the beginning of
Yeah.
time.
Well,
Really?
it has.
Males bond with each other to help
Yeah.
control and
It always
protect
has.
the women.
Yes, yes.
You know?
It always has.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing is, how do we not fall into that category, that trap, and how we get out of that.
Well, this is what we're doing.
Because,
Let me
you know what I
let me
mean?
give you a little overview of what we do.
Because
Cleveland
African
was the
Americans
key.
have been in this country from the very beginning.
Cleveland is the key. I'm gonna tell
Okay.
you why.
Yes.
When we went to L.A., it was too much going on outside of Watts. It had already penetrated
Everywhere.
everywhere,
Right.
and they were too well. The rappers was in the game. They had Tupac's over here, Suge Knight. We trying to, and they all got pockets full of money. I said, man, this Cali thing is gonna be a piece of work. But we had brothers out there, brother named Imam Mujahid. They signed the peace treaty in L.A. in '92.
Right.
The next day, the verdict came out. Rodney King and all hell broke out.
Yeah.
So, that had to take care of itself. Then we went to Chicago with the same message. Certain groups were ready to get down and be a part of that.
Right.
And they were more amenable, but still, there's so many of them there. And you had to ride for half an hour, 40 minutes to get from one. So in Cleveland, everybody's half an hour away from each other. Some go down, hey, we meet at Mount Sinai in the parking lot. Some go down, we're going to meet at Lonnie Burton. We're going to go out. Because after they signed the peace treaties, we had it going on here, man. We had phone calls and everything.
How can we get them?
This is where we
are
at now. We
Right.
got to
That's
redo
why
it.
Where were we at
We're
now?
coming back. We really know now, with in the midst of all this organizing, we had no idea the omnibus crime bill and what that would do and how
How it
this.
forced them to organize as well.
yeah.
That's all the
Reorganize.
politics.
Yeah,
of crime.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So we're going to be calling for summits here again with some of us who are still around. Though some of us are retired, some of them, we're going to do it in the honor of Lou and Fannie Lewis and all them to help to push us, Carl Stokes and them. We're going to put together a summit in Cleveland. It's be 25 years next year. But there's a whole lot of symbolism in next year. The Glenville, Martin Luther King assassination, Robert King. We know cyclically our people move in the planet in cycles. And we know it's time now. These young people now don't know nothing about peace treaties and all that. We're trying to introduce it to them because they have like another kind of thing where they are kind of like more tribalistic as opposed to nation-oriented.
Okay.
Where those guys in Chicago, when you said nation time, they understood what you was talking about.
Okay.
And we had like the people from SCLC, NAACP, we had the Muslims, the Christians, the Black Hebrews, and we reached out to all of them, and now we're coming back again with the ministers and everything. And we're going to empower these young people because we really believe God is with us. In fact, I know God is with us because we couldn't have attributed nothing.
Came this far.
It
Right.
is only because God had his hand on that thing. So we asked him for
Next
When
year,
is
a
the
conference.
summit?
we're starting the moves now. We're gonna push it back. We talked to the mayor. We're getting with the other county council people and all that to see what it'll be a few months out because we got to do a lot of work
County
on the ground.
Right.
Because these young
To build
boys
it.
now got a game called the Heartless Felons, and they're in the middle of everything, and they're not really that close, but they're very dangerous. They're killing each other. They're balkanizing the neighborhoods
Yes.
again, and they're not like the mafia. The media wants to put them out there like this is the new mafia, and they are nothing like the mafia.
Because they're not as organized.
You better not shoot no women in Little Italy.
Right.
You better not rob no women on Murray Hill. You better not go up there in Little Italy and start no stuff up there. They don't care what you call yourself. You'd be lucky to get out of there alive. We don't have that infrastructure in our community like we used to. So we're calling all our men. It's just like we call it when the fire comes into the house and the house is on fire, you're looking for first responders. They could be Muslim, they could be Christian, they could be white, they could be brown, they could be black, they could be female, they could be male. We need first responders that can come out and respond to these critical situations, find out who's who, what's what, introduce themselves. Most of these people are in these problems because of their family situations. A lot of these women have got 5 or 6 sons. Unless they have a real strong infrastructure, a lot of these boys get gang involved. I can tell you families, I won't never say it, but at least 6 right off the top of my head, and I can tell you where they're from and this and that. Most of their sons are dead or in prison, and they're young. They were young mothers, and they were not given the kind of support systems or whatever to keep that thing, somewhat intact.
Right.
So that's what we have to do. It's a family center, and we're using the rites of passage approach. We're saying a family unit is the most important unit without a doubt. And so consequently, we got to dig deep in and deal with the psychological healing that these young males have to go through, because that's the
So it
problem.
comes down to mentorship. It
Yeah,
comes
man.
down to
So tell us about
Clearly.
the rites of passage.
Rites of passage is everybody does rites of passage. The leader and founder of the Boy Scouts said he started the Boy Scouts because when he was overseas in Africa, he kept running across ceremonies where young girls and young men were introduced into adulthood and given the title as men and women. And they had to be responsible for acquiring a certain amount of knowledge. There were things they had to do, they had to learn. There was certain community service they had to provide. And he said he wanted something like that for the young people in America. He was a Mason. He started it through his Masonic group. But that's no problem, because this is how the schools of learning developed anyway. The first Masons were black. You know, so rites of passage started in Africa, and it came out throughout the rest of the world, and we got to go back and get that, because rites of passage shows you the difference between a male and a man, or a girl and a woman. Or, you know, because you got a lot of girls running around out here, but they're not necessarily women, and a whole lot of males that have very little manhood, you know, stuff in their program.
Right.
And when they look at manhood now is who can hit the hardest, who got the biggest gun. I'm talking about the boys in the street.
Okay.
They got babies everywhere. They sperm donors.
Right.
They like rabbits. They ain't taking care of none of these kids. And so, but they got it going on in the streets. Now, so what's happening is that they got to be set down either in prison or in the streets, because they're going to be in one of them two places, and be introduced to this concept. And we're saying to the Bureau of Prisons and all that, hey, man, you know, are y'all trying to keep a population explosion going on in here? If you're not, then this is what you need to be doing, you know, across the board. And we've proven it with the baddest, cats that I could never think would turn around. You know, they was hardcore gangsters. Man, they turn their lives around. They got families now. They going to work. They ain't making a lot of money. They ain't complaining.
Right.
Those are the mentors we're talking about for these boys in the street. They got to talk to people who have similar experiences.
Right.
And then we, you know, reinforce it. I mean, I had them in my family.
Right.
Like I said, I had 13 uncles. 10 of them, 9 of them was gangsters. And what they say gangsterism is. But they were polite. They wore suits. They had Cadillacs. They had money in their pocket. They didn't cuss that much. And I was like, hey, man, what does this mean for me? You know what I mean? They had relationships with their clergy members, and they had relationship with the ministers. So and I said, well, how did y'all win? We know money out. A lot of churches were built off the numbers.
a lot.
A lot of black businesses. Then came the lottery.
A lot of white businesses.
Check that out. So the lottery came, undermined a lot of that.
Yes.
And they
on
you know,
purpose.
and then now with the rites of passage, you can do rites of passage in the church, the mosque, the Masonic hall. It's not religious specific.
Okay.
It's dealing with principles.
Giving principles.
Come on,
instructions.
yeah.
Okay.
You speak Spanish? Okay, go ahead. Here's your rights thing.
Okay.
You in the Church of God in Christ? Hey, come on.
Okay.
You in the born again, whatever, Baptist, whatever. Washwood, boom, boom, boom. Bring it on in. You non-denominational? Come on with it. But there's some universal principles that if we introduce to these young men and try to reinforce these things, hopefully, and believe me, the ones in the
Put their
90s.
mind
Yeah,
in the right time.
these guys are nowhere like the 90s,
Okay.
and I'm not trying to brag on them.
Right.
These boys' physicality, they don't fight a lot, they shoot a lot, and they're not in shape, they're not even healthy.
Okay.
And I ain't trying to talk about it because I
Right.
know they'd be like, man, why you ragging on us?
Right.
It's the reality. I go in the weight room. I am 60-something years old. I go up to some of these high schools and work out with the football players. They leave in the weight room and we just getting started. They got the phone in their hand.
Yeah.
They going to
Too much of
Yeah,
that.
they going
Yeah.
to Snapchat, Instagram and they Facebook and I'm like, whoa, man, this is scary.
Well, that's dead man walking.
Yeah.
Pretty much saying.
Yeah.
Their minds they're still back in space.
They can't. Their attention span.
Yeah, they don't have it.
What you got a coach at Glenville takes those boys and mold them.
Right.
Next thing you know, they got city champions and their state,
Yes.
recognition. And then they shooting that over there at the football field.
Right.
So Ted Ginn calls me and the little brothers. We got to go down there and post up at the football field because the game bangers want to start shooting in the middle of practice. So we have to do this. We got to be first responders.
So you guys are everywhere.
Yeah.
And when something breaks out, they call you.
As a team,
As
yeah,
a
we
team,
go
and
out.
then you
Yeah,
go out to the different areas.
Right.
To restore peace in the neighborhood.
that's it. That's it. And
What
we
a
work
job.
with the police. We work. You're not going to arrest your way out of this. We're not going to imprison our way out of this.
Right.
We have to have proactive
Active.
people. There you go. And brothers that got jobs or not got jobs or just willing to make a difference. And this is a real big thing we're going to do is deputize our brothers and sisters.
Okay.
We got the Black Shield, the Black Vanguard. Hey, there's no more important first responder than somebody responding to a fire. One of the most deepest pledges I ever seen was the Black Firefighters Pledge. Man, it is deep. But what do you do as a firefighter when you come to the scene and you swear by oath that if somebody's burning or smoke in the hell, you're gonna bring them on. All of that is what we have to be.
Right.
And we got to look to our suburban community and our inner ring suburbs because unfortunately, in a lot of our core urban areas, we got to have some presence of males. We're going to have to some men got to be present because too many females, household-headed groups in these projects, and a lot of these guys come down there, they don't live down there, they cause problems down there, they come down there and sell dope and do their thing and they leave out, and then they got apartments out there on Lakeshore Boulevard somewhere. So we got to talk some real shop with some of these brothers.
Okay. Well, this is just, you should be writing a book.
Yeah,
Is there
that's
a book?
coming.
Is
Yeah,
that coming
it's in
In the making?
yeah.
That is a history book. I was just watching yesterday on television where they were going over the 1967 riots, and it was New Jersey, and they were Newark, New Jersey,
Yep.
where it broke out, and then just how it just touched all the other cities, a massive breakout. And then as you look at it, they're talking about the police brutality. Well, how many years ago that's been? Now like the cycle has repeated itself.
So it's never really
Well,
left,
but
it's got more militarized.
Yeah,
Right, so now
man.
we're back to that again,
Which is the reason why Cleveland, once again, is so important because when the rebellion took place here, a little known Black history fact that we're going to bring out, and it's clearly the truth. When the militants started their thing here in '68, the white police officers were contacted by some black officers. The mayor was involved, and the white officers said, "Look, man, we'll pull back because we're outgunned." And they were right because the militants here had M1 carbines and automatic pistols. They didn't have that at Newark. They didn't have Cleveland was the most well-organized group. So what happened is that
There's a lot of veterans.
Oh yeah, Carl Stokes, Jim Brown, Harlell, Lou Stokes, and all of them said, "Look, send the white cops back to the barracks. We'll get out there in the streets and calm these brothers down." I mean, who's gonna say something to Jim Brown and all them? They did it and it worked. And the white police officers said that was a lie, that we didn't go back as a result of a ceasefire.
Well, of course they're going to say that.
Yeah.
But, but hopefully you show, there's hope.
I'm
Hope
gonna
still.
say this is it takes a lot of courage, and I'm glad that you guys are out here trying to make a difference and bring peace because Cleveland, we're on an uprise, and it makes a difference. If we can take one city and make a change, surely the rest will follow.
We have the best legacy, second to none here.
Yes.
When you look at the people whose shoulders we stand on, man, this other stuff here ain't nothing compared to what our brothers and sisters went through. And we honor their legacy, and we will be, acknowledging them in this process.
When that time comes, please we'll have you back on. Let us know when
That conference is going to happen.
Conference going to happen, so the people here will know about it. And we could just go on and on. I really appreciate you coming on our show today.
Yes,
This has
Khalid.
just been
It was very knowledgeable.
enlightening.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I've been fortunate, and we are fortunate to be here with you because we can't get the word out. We don't have no black media.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here we go. We're just gonna thank our audience for tuning in with us today on What's Going On with Sir John.
And Lady D.
And we'll see you next Sunday. And let's have a very peaceful, loving week. Okay, be
All right.
kind to one another. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Excellent.
And live with gratitude.
Yes. Yes.
Live with gratitude.